everyone, welcome back to Anyone Can Cook with Lauren. I am Lauren, and today we're going to be making a very easy and simple meatball recipe and marinara sauce. This is a very versatile meal that you can make. You can make meatball subs, sandwiches, you can make spaghetti and meatballs, or just eat them by themselves. I personally like to just have some meatballs sometimes. So we are going to start here with a pound of ground beef. And then here I have a mixture of a half teaspoon of salt, black pepper, onion powder, garlic powder. And then I also have some oregano in there. You can just put in however much you think you would like. I put probably a quarter teaspoon in. And then a half teaspoon or so of Parmesan cheese, grated, probably a little bit more. But that gives a nice flavor in the meatballs, and it gives a little bit of that salt too. I also have about a quarter cup of breadcrumbs here. This is going to help firm up the meatballs, give them a little bit of body to them. And then I have an egg yolk with a few tablespoons of milk as well. We're going to put that into, and that helps keep the meatballs moist. So we're just going to go right into it with our hands. Not the most pleasant texture in the world, but it is the easiest way to mix this. You can use a spatula or a wooden spoon or a large spoon, but it's easier to just use your hands. So I'm going to go in first with the breadcrumbs and just sprinkle those over the top. And you kind of want to start mixing things in one at a time. You don't really want to throw everything on top and then try and mix it, because sometimes it's harder to incorporate that way. But this is a very easy to make dish once you learn how. And it can be a really nice thing to have in the fridge. You can keep these for a couple days. You can have them for lunch. You can have them for dinner when you get home at night if you have a job where you work late. Spaghetti and meatballs is also just a really easy family meal, and I really love it. You can have this also with any kind of pasta, your favorite pasta that you'd like to. But my mom really liked making spaghetti and meatballs growing up, so that's why I like making it now. Okay. And we're definitely not going to use all of the egg and milk, because it can get a little too wet. The breadcrumbs will start to absorb some of that liquid though. So we do have to let it rest for a little bit while it absorbs all of that. So we're going to go ahead and put in our seasoning mixture as well. Here we go. Get all that out of there. And over on the stove back there, I have our marinara sauce starting. I have it on medium-low heat. And I have a large can of crushed tomatoes as well as a 15-ounce can of tomato sauce in there as our base. Just getting that warmed up so when we add our seasonings in, it's kind of ready to go. So as you can see, the breadcrumbs have kind of absorbed some of that moisture in there. See that? And now it's not as wet. It's starting to thicken up a little bit. So we are going to let the ground beef just sit for a little bit while we tend to our marinara sauce. But this was kind of one of those staples growing up. My mom likes to make meatball paninis too. I also love meatball paninis. All right, so we're going to let this sit, let those breadcrumbs soak up the rest of that liquid. Gonna wash up, and we're gonna go start our marinara. All right, so we have our marinara starting over here on the stove. I have it on medium-low heat, so it can start to simmer. And as I said before, I had one large can of crushed tomatoes in here, as well as a 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. You can put tomato paste in there too if you want to thicken it up a little, but it will thicken up as it simmers. So we are going to start adding our spices to the mix here. But first of all, we have olive oil. We're just going to add a drizzle of this on top. So just a small drizzle, 2 little circles, that's it. And a good rule of thumb for making sauce like this is doing an even coating of seasoning on top. So whatever size pan you have it in, just one even layer of each spice on top. and that'll give you a really rounded out flavor. That's how my mom taught me how to make this, in an easy way of measuring. But if you want to measure, I would say always start with probably maybe 1.5 teaspoons of anything with the sauce, and that way you can kind of figure out next time what you want to put more of in, instead of starting with a lot right off the bat. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start adding our spices in. All right, so we have some salt here, and we're just going to go in and we're just going to put an even layer of salt just around the top, a couple passes there. Black pepper, just going to grind some of this on top. We have garlic powder. Onion powder. Basil. This one's a little more difficult to get out than the others. Oregano. And just a small sprinkling of red pepper flakes. You do not want to use too much. It'll make it way too spicy. So we're going to give this a mix so we don't start to burn on the bottom of the pan or anything. And make sure that those are evenly distributed throughout. I can already smell it. It already smells amazing. All right. And we have one more secret ingredient to add to this marinara. Okay, now this is a super special ingredient for marinara that I had never used until my mom used it. Worcestershire sauce. It gives it a nice tangy flavor. And all you need to do is just put a few squirts in there, and then you're good. It'll give it a really nice salty flavor, tangy flavor. It really adds something else to it that nothing else I've found adds. It's almost hard to explain, but it's very savory, and it gives it a little bit of a kick and just elevates it beyond the regular kind of tomato, mild flavored marinara. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to turn the heat down on this to low. We're going to put the lid on just a little bit, and we're going to move it to the back burner on the opposite side so we can start our meatballs over here. All right, now that we've got our sauce started and it's simmering, we're going to go ahead and make our meatballs. So I have a plate here to put them on. I have my skillet over there heating up with some olive oil in it, probably a couple tablespoons on just under medium heat. So you can bake meatballs in the oven as well in a baking dish, but I prefer to make them on the stove because it gives them kind of like a crust on the outside, and they don't feel as soggy when you eat them, and it's just a better flavor. So we're going to go ahead, and you can see the ground beef has soaked up all of that moisture, so it's nice and firm now. So go ahead and just give it a good mix one more time, and then we'll make our meatballs. So you can make these pretty much any size you want. It's just gonna vary the cooking time. So obviously the smaller you make them, the shorter time it is for them to cook. If you make them a lot bigger, you're probably gonna need to cook them for like 10 minutes. We're gonna try and go probably in between. Not too small, not too big. And depending on how many you're making, you may have to make them in batches, just depending on how big your pan is. I should be able to fit all of these in mine. Hopefully not too much trouble. So, see, just making sure everything's all mixed. There were some spices that weren't quite mixed in. So just gonna make sure we don't have a mouthful of oregano. And growing up, this was always one of my jobs helping cook, is if we were having meatloaf, if we were making meatballs, mixing the ground meat together. So I would say meatballs that are probably about a golf ball size is what you want to go for here. So about the size of a golf ball, nice and rounded out here. And we'll go ahead and just make the rest of our meat into that. So if you had a job growing up in the kitchen in your house, let me know what it was down in the comments, because mine was always helping prep dinner. Typically, it would involve using ground meat and getting everything together, or throwing everything in a crock pot after school, helping get ingredients from the store on my way home from school once I was old enough. You know, everyone I feel like had a job in the kitchen growing up if your parents cooked. And I was lucky enough where both of my parents can actually cook pretty well. So they taught me a lot about cooking. And I remember one of the first times that my mom was teaching me how to cook, I think I was probably around 7 or 8 years old, is my mom had me help make dinner for my dad for when he would get home from work. And it was teriyaki chicken. And I vaguely remember being in the kitchen with my mom cooking, and I'm sure she did most of the work, but I remember doing some of the work, and I was very proud. All right, I'm going to finish getting all of these done, and then once they are ready, we're going to go ahead and put them in our skillet with our heated oil. So I will see you guys then. All right, so we have our formed meatballs here. It made 14 meatballs, so a good amount. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the tongs, and we're gonna put them in the pan here. The pan got a little bit hot, so I did turn it down just a bit, but I am gonna turn it back up once we get them on. So you wanna be very careful you don't get spattered doing this. You're just gonna place them all in the pan pretty evenly. And these will cook about 2 minutes or so per side. We're gonna flip them around a lot and just get them cooked evenly on all sides. And it's already starting to smell great. Honestly, you cannot go wrong with meatballs. And you can use pork too. You can also use veal. You can even make sausage meatballs if you wanted. But I just use ground beef this time. But typically I'll use a mix of ground pork and ground beef. It is a little less fat in there, and it's slightly healthier. But honestly, I like using ground pork in a lot of stuff. Like I use ground pork in chili. I use ground pork for tacos. I've used it for multiple things. I tend to like it more than ground beef. But for meatballs, typically most people are going to want ground beef. So we are going to let these cook for a couple minutes on this side, and then we're going to go ahead and flip them over. All right, so it's been a couple minutes, so we're going to go ahead, we're going to flip them over. You can see they've formed a nice crust on that side. It's nice and browned. And you can see that the meat is starting to cook. So we're going to go ahead and flip that over there. And they are going to kind of get a little bit wobbly as we keep flipping them side to side. So we're just going to do top and bottom first, as best you can. These aren't going to be perfectly round meatballs once they're done, but they're going to be delicious meatballs, and that's what counts. And I learned to make meatballs this way from a recipe for Swedish meatballs that I made for my husband for his birthday one year. And honestly, I love cooking them this way ever since. And that is a recipe that we'll probably dive into on the channel here at some point as well. Okay. Okay. So that was all cooking on the other side now, so we're just going to leave them here for a couple minutes. And we're just going to keep flipping them until they're completely cooked and done brown on all sides. You can even cut one open to make sure that it's cooked on the inside, but a couple minutes per side, they're going to be cooked, so don't worry. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to finish these up, and we're going to check on our marinara sauce after as well. I have that simmering on the back of the stove, and really with marinara, it's nice because once you put all of the ingredients in, and stir it up. You can just put the lid on, let it simmer, and you can let it simmer as long as you want. I typically do for like a half an hour, 20 minutes minimum. Typically half an hour to 45 minutes gets all the flavor in there, and you can really see how it's going to taste. Like, you can store it and you can have it later on too. So we are going to let these guys sit and go back to them in a little bit. All right, welcome to the stove. So as you can see, the meatballs, when you are flipping them over, they can sometimes turn into like little triangle shapes. And that's fine. If you can only get it to 3 or 4 of the sides, that's not a problem. You don't have to do every side as long as it's cooked. That's what we care about. So we're gonna leave our little meatball triangles here, and we're gonna come back to them in a few minutes when they're all cooked. All right, you guys, so our meatballs are all done. We're gonna go ahead and take them off of the pan here. We're gonna turn that off. And very carefully, we're gonna put them on a plate that I have over here on the stove. You can see they got nice and brown on all sides here. They're a little bit dark, but that was because the pan was too hot when I put them in. So just make sure that your heat is not too high. But these look great, they smell great. And be careful of the pan spattering too. You do not want to get burnt by meatball oil. All right. There we go. Okay. And I am going to move this pan out of the way. We're going to move our sauce back over here for a minute, and we're going to see how that's tasting. All right, so we're going to check on our sauce here. Oh yeah, that looks good. All right. Just going to set that lid aside. Careful, it's very hot. Give it a good stir. And we're going to see how we did. Looks pretty good here. I'm going to give it a taste though. It is like actual hot lava right now. So, might need to give it a second. Tastes great. It has a nice kick to it from the pepper flakes, a nice tang from the Worcestershire sauce. But overall, the flavor is really, really good. And like I said before, just an even layer of all of those seasonings is a really good baseline for flavor, and then you can always add more if you need to. But you don't want to add too much because then it's really hard to get rid of that flavor. Like I made curry sauce one time, and the salt that I was using, the lid popped off of the container into my curry, and it was so salty I couldn't even eat it. No matter what I added to it, no matter what I did, it was just salt. That was the only flavor you had. So start with the least amount possible and work your way up. All right, so now that everything is good, we're gonna go ahead and plate our meatballs, and we're gonna see how we did. All right, so I've plated some of our meatballs here with our sauce. They look awesome. You can see here the meatballs got nice and brown on the outside. That sauce thickened up a little bit. It's nice and red. So we're gonna go ahead and cut into a meatball and see how we did. Oh yeah. So you can see here that it is cooked all the way through. If I can grab that for you to show you. So you can see there's no more pink left. It's nice and cooked through here. They're super moist, that's why it's trying to fall apart on me. So we're gonna go ahead and let's see how we did. It's super hot. Yeah, so making them in the pan gives them that nice crust on the outside, and it just gives it a really good flavor and a nice texture when you bite into it. The Parmesan cheese in there, you can really taste it coming through. It gives it a little extra saltiness than just the salt itself, and it does add a little bit of body to the meatball along with the breadcrumbs. But these are super moist, super savory, These would be awesome in a meatball sub or in a panini. And obviously spaghetti and meatballs or any pasta that you want with them is probably the go-to and the quickest option. But yeah, the sauce is tangy, the meatballs are moist. You can't really ask for anything else. So thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. The recipe and the instructions will be in the description. And again, thanks for tuning in. This has been Anyone Can Cook. And remember, anyone can cook.